Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Shirley Raps over here, reporting from Babylon Talmud World. Babylon Talmud World headquarters at Jeff Handel's apartment, Tekoa Street, number 7, Jerusalem. That's where I am. Today we're studying Daf Kuf Chaf Vav, Daf 126 of Masechta Shabbis. Let's begin with an overview. We continue our discussion about window shutters, the machlokas between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, about how to be able to use window shutters on Shabbos. And then we talk about like covers of kalim, like lids and stuff of kalim, moving those thingamajigger. I think technically it's probably thingamajiggy, but I feel like thingamajigger works like a little better. I don't know. Whatever. Just choose one. I don't think it's that important. Cool. Next, then we're going to begin the new perek of Mifanin. Okay, the 18th perek. We begin the 18th perek of Masechta Shabbos today. That was a delayed laugh. Okay, I just couldn't hold it in for long enough. Alright, eventually it came out. Alright, friends, let's begin. We are starting on Daf Kuf Chav Hei Amud Beis all the way at the bottom. Well, 2 lines from the bottom. Okay, so remember, we're talking about the window shutters yesterday. In the Mishnah, it was Machlokes Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus and the Chachamim. So Rabbi Eliezer says that in order to be able to use a window shutter on Shabbos, so it has to be tied and dangling from the window. Then it's clear that it's part of the window and you can use it. Chachamim say, bein kach uvein kach. We don't know what that means, but definitely they argue with Rabbi Eliezer and they say it doesn't have to be tied up and dangling from the window. The question is, to what extent do you need it to be tied up, just not dangling, or maybe you don't even have to be, maybe it doesn't have to be tied up at all. So we have to understand the opinion of the Chachamim. So, my bein kach uvein kach. So what's the opinion of the Chachamim here? What is needed, what is not needed in order to be able to use this window shutter? Amr Abba, Amr of Kahana. So it says Rabbi Abba in the name of Rav Kahana, Bein kosher, bein she'eno kosher, v'usha mesukan. Aha. So according to Rabbi Abba in the name of Rav Kahana, it doesn't even need to be tied up. You can mamish just have the window shutter like lying on the ground, and then I guess you just pick it up and somehow attach it to your window. And that would be acceptable. You wouldn't have to worry about bonet, you wouldn't have to worry about muktzah, nothing like that. You just would have to have some kind of a kavana in advance that right there you can use it as a window shutter. But it doesn't even have to be tied b'chla. Okay? Amalei Rabbi Yirmiyah. Now Rabbi Yirmiyah says to Rabbi Abba. Now, this is interesting. So Rabbi Abba, Rabbi Rabbi Zer, Rabbi Yirmiyah, so they were like all students of Rabbi Abba, who was a student of Rabbi Yochanan, at least according to Janine's chart, which is interesting. Now, both Rabbi Abba and Rabbi Zera made aliyah from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. Right, we saw in 2 separate occasions that Rabbi Zera, it came up twice where Rav Yehuda's students from Bavel, from Pumbedisa in Bavel, his students were trying to avoid him because they wanted to make aliyah. One was with Rabbi Zera, and one was with Rabbi Abba. So we see that Rabbi Abba and Rabbi Zera were both students of Rav Yehuda in Pumbedisa. They then made aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, where they were students of Rabbi Abba. Okay, so that's Rabbi Abba and Rabbi Zera, and Rabbi Yirmiyah, I think, was in that crew as well. So you have Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Abba, Rabbi Yirmiyah. I think they were like contemporaries, and I guess they were students. According to Janine's chart, they were all students of Rabbi Abba. That's all I could say. Anyways, so Rabbi Yirmiyah now says to Rabbi Abba, okay, V'lei mamar bein tali uvein she'eno tali v'usha kosher. No. So Rabbi Yirmiyah says to Rabbi Abba, one second. Rabbi Abba, you're saying that it doesn't even need to be tied b'chlal. Meaning, Rabbi Eliezer says that the window shutter would have to be tied up and dangling. Now, Rabbi Abba says that the Chachamim disagree with Rabbi Eliezer, and they say, not only does the window shutter not have to be dangling, right? Not only can it be lying on the floor, but it doesn't even need to be tied. To which Rabbi Yirmiyah says, one second. I would say that the Chachamim say that it doesn't have to be dangling in the air. It could be lying on the ground, but it should still have to be tied. Right? Amalei Rabbi Yirmiyah says to Rabbi Abba, V'lema Mar, Rabbi Abba, why don't you say, Bein talui uvein she'enu talui v'usha kosher, that according to the Chachamim, it doesn't have to be dangling in the air, but it would have to be tied up. How come? The Amar Rabbi Bar Chana Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Bar Chana says the name of Rabbi Yochanan, ki machlokas kan ka machlokas b'neger anigrar, that the machlokas, the same machlokas over here between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim regarding this window shutter is the same machlokas that transpires with regard to a like a door stopper thing, right? That like peg that we saw the other day that you stick in the threshold of the door to prevent the door from being able to open. So there's a similar machlokas regarding this neger and nigrar, regarding this door stopper that is attached to the door, but that you can take it out, you can take it in and out of the door stop, but it's still tied to the door. Ditnan, as we learned in the Mishnah, neger and nigrar. Okay, so if you have this like door stop, right, this thing that you stick in the threshold of the door on the floor so that the door can't open. Okay, so we say noa linbo ba mikdash v'lo ba medina. So we say that this neger and nigrar, you can use it to lock a door in the Beis HaMikdash, but not outside of the Beis HaMikdash. In the Beis HaMikdash, but not outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Ve'amunach kan v'chan aser. But if it is just lying there, then it won't even be permitted even in the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, and we're going to explain what this neger and nigrar is, and munach, we're going to explain what that is in a minute. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, says Rabbi Yehuda, hamunach muter b'mikdash, that when it's just munach, when it's just lying there, it's permitted in the Beis HaMikdash. V'anigrar b'medina, and if it is nigrar, then it is even permitted in the outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Now, Vitanya, we learned in the Brisa, Ezu neger and nigrar. Okay. So what is this neger and nigrar? And we're going to make sense of this whole Mishnah right now, this neger and nigrar thing. So what is a neger and nigrar? What is this door peg that's considered draggable, that's nigrar? That we said according to the Tanakama that you would be allowed to lock a door with it in the Beis HaMikdash, but not outside of the Beis HaMikdash. So here's the answer, friends. Kol shekasher v'talui v'rosho magia la'aretz. It's talking about this doorstop that is tied and dangling and reaches the ground. So we're saying that according to the Tanakama, we have this doorstop that is, I guess, let's say tied to the top doorpost, and it's dangling down and it reaches the ground. So it's tied, but it's not dangling. Well, meaning, when we say dangling, like let's say according to Rabbi Eliezer, like dangling with the window shutter, it means dangling in the air. But if it reaches the ground, it's not considered talui, it's not considered dangling. So what we're saying is, this neger and nigrar that we say that you're allowed to use in the Beis HaMikdash, but not outside of the Beis HaMikdash, it's talking about this doorstop that is tied up, and it's hanging from the top of the door, but it reaches the ground. It's on the ground. And we're saying that in the Beis HaMikdash it's permitted, but outside of the Beis HaMikdash, it's not permitted. We're saying because it would be only asur midrabanan, that would be considered, I guess a gzeira about bona, that we don't want you, sticking something into the house. But so it's asur midrabanan. We say ein shivus b'mikdash. So in the Beis HaMikdash it would be permitted, but outside of the Beis HaMikdash, i.e., for you and me, for everybody else, you would not be allowed to use this doorstop that, even though it's tied, it's resting on the floor. In order to use this doorstop, outside of Beis HaMikdash, i.e., for you and me to be able to use this doorstop, it would have to be tied and dangling in the air. Okay? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Zeh af b'medina mutter, to which Rabbi Yehuda responds and says, no, there's no problem. What, if you have a doorstop and it's tied, even though it's touching the ground, who cares? You could still use it, it's no problem. As long as it's tied. Well then what, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is not allowed b'Medina, what then wouldn't be allowed for you and me outside of the Beis HaMikdash? Kol she'eno lo kashuv lo talui, v'shomto manicho b'keren zavis. If it isn't tied and it isn't hanging, it's just like you take this doorstop, you stick it into the threshold, now nobody can come in, now you take it out and you put it down somewhere, well, that would be considered like bonet, would be considered like building, and that would not be allowed outside of, in the Medina, outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Although he does say that it would be permitted in the Beis HaMikdash. So I guess that it wouldn't mamish be considered bonet, because then it shouldn't be allowed in the Beis HaMikdash either. As Rashi says, Hamunach muter b'mikdash dekev de mesukan me'esmo lahachi la bonehu. Since it's put aside since from yesterday for this purpose, it's not considered bonet. Seder, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Fine. Friends, so now let's review what we just said. We said a few things. We had two different prices. One explained the other. What's going on here? Basically what we're saying is we have machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda. And this is the important part, that according to the Tanakama, if you have this doorstop that is tied, but it's touching the floor, so according to the Tanakama, you would not be allowed, you and I, forget about the Beis HaMikdash, you and I would not be allowed to use that. In order for us to use it, it would have to be tied and dangling in the air. Rabbi Yehuda says no. As long as it's tied, even if it's not dangling in the air, if it's resting on the floor, you and I would be able to use it. Okay? The Amr Rabbi Yeshua bar Abba, it says Rabbi Yeshua bar Abba, Mishmei de'ula, Mantana Neger Nigrar, who is the Tanakama that says that the Neger and Nigrar would have to be both tied and dangling in the air in order for us to be able to use it? I.e., who's the Tanakama who argues with Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Eliezer. It's Rabbi Eliezer who says that by a window shutter, it would have to be tied and dangling. Well, guess what? He's also the Tana by this doorstop that says it would have to be tied and dangling in order to be able to use it. And Rav Bar Chana had said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that the same machlokas that there is by the window shutter, it's that is the same machlokas by Neger and Nigrar. And therefore, if we know that by Neger and Nigrar, the machlokas is, does it have to be both tied and dangling, or is simply tying it enough? And if Rav Bar Chana is saying in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that that's the same exact machlokas as by a window shutter, well, guess what, friends? What does that mean? What's the machlokas by the window shutter? The machlokas is, does it have to be both tied and dangling like Rabbi Eliezer, or is tying it enough? So therefore, Rabbi Abba, how can you say that according to Chachamim it doesn't even have to be tied at all? If by Neger and Nigrar nobody would say it doesn't have to be tied at all, it would have to at least be tied. And Rav Bar Chana says that that's the same machlokas by Neger and Nigrar as it is by the window shutter. So therefore, it would seem that according to the Chachamim, it would have to be tied. It's just a matter of does it have to be dangling in the air or not. That was Rabbi Abba's kasha. That was Rabbi Yirmiyah's kasha and Rabbi Abba. Amarle. So Rabbi Abba responds to Rabbi Yirmiyah on a da'amiki hai Tana. Well, I hold like a different Tana. As far as I'm concerned, the Chachamim here by the window shutters, and I'm arguing that they would say that you don't even have to tie it b'chlal. They say, they're like the following brisa. As we learn in the brisa, the Tanya, if you have a reed and the balabayas, you have a homeowner that says, you know what, I'm going to use this reed as a lock for a door. I don't know, I guess somehow you take this stick, this reed, and you're going to put it across the door so nobody can open it. So, bisman shekasher v'talui b'pesach, well, as long as it is both tied and hanging by the door, so poseach v'no'abo, you can use it to open and close the door. Ein kasher v'talui, if it's not tied up and hanging, ein poseach v'no'abo, well then you cannot open and close with it. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel omer mesukan afal pi she'einu kasher. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, look, the only thing that matters is that it's set aside for this purpose from before Shabbos. It doesn't have to be even tied bichlal. And therefore Rabbi Abba says, look, as far as I'm concerned, the Chachamim here are like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, who says that it wouldn't even have to be tied. So don't bring me your fancy stuff from Rabbi Bachan and Rabbi Yochanan that says it's the same machlokas by the window shutters as well as by Neger and Nigrar. Forget it. Forget it. Over here, it's not a machlok, it's not like the machlokas by Neger and Nigrar. Over here, the Chachamim are holding like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel that it wouldn't even have to be tied b'chlal. Amr Rav Yehuda bar Shilas, Amr Rav Asi, Amr Rav Yochanan, halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. So Rav Yehuda bar Shilas says in the name of Rav Asi, who says in the name of Rav Yochanan, that halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, that this reed that you're going to use to close the door doesn't even have to be tied b'chlal. Miyam Rabbi Yochanan Achi, would Rabbi Yochanan really say like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel? Ve'atnan, but we learn in the Mishnah, as we're going to learn in a few minutes. Kol kisuyei hakelim sheish lahem beis achiza nitalim b'Shabbos. Now the Mishnah says that any lid to a kli, if it has a handle on it, you can move it on Shabbos. V'amr Rav Yehuda bar Shila, Amr Rav Asi, Amr Rav Yochanan, and on that, Rav Yehuda bar Shila says the name of Rav Asi, the name of Rav Yochanan, v'hu sheyesh toras kli alein. However, this lid, in order to be able to move it, Davka needs to have a toras kli. It Davka needs to be a kli in its own right. And if it's not a kli, you can't move it. And therefore, this stick, this reed that you can use to lock the door, it's not a kli. It's not a kli. It's not a vessel. It's just a piece, it's a stick, it's a reed. And therefore, how could Rabbi Yochanan possibly hold like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, who says that you can use this reed to lock your door even if it's not tied, yet Rabbi Yochanan says that in order to be able to move something, it has to be a kli. But this reed isn't a kli. How could he agree with Rabbi Shimon Gamliel who says you can move this reed? Maybe you'll say, no, but this reed is also a kli. This reed is also a kli because maybe you can use it to mix olives or something like that. But Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Torah's kli alav? Yeah, but Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, the fact of the matter is, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel does not require that this thing should be a kli. We learned in Brisa, as we learned yesterday, that if you have these palm branches, that you initially cut them down so that you can burn them, and then you change your mind and said, you know what, I want to sit on them. Tzarech l'kasher, you have to tie them up. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer ain't tzarech l'kasher. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that you don't have to tie them up, you don't have to make them into kli. It's okay. You can just leave them there and you can sit on them. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel doesn't require a kli. So how could it possibly be that Rabbi Yochanan is passing like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel if Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that this reed wouldn't have to be a kli, and Rabbi Yochanan says that in order to move something it has to be a kli? The Gemara answers Rabbi Yochanan tzvir lekavasi b'chada u'fala gale b'chada. It says, look, Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel in one regard. What's that? In that this reed wouldn't have to be tied and hanging. But he doesn't hold like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel in another regard, which is Rabbi Shimon Gamliel would say that in order to move something, it would not have to be a kli. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan says it would have to be a kli. Okay, say it. Darsha Yitzchak Nafcha Pischa Dereish Gelusa. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, he taught at the door of the Reish Gelusa, halacha Rabbi Eliezer, that the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer, that this window shutter would have to be both tied and dangling in the air. Masav Rav Amram, to which Rav Amram asks a question. We have a Mishnah and Af Kuf Nun Zayin that says, from a story with the father of Reb Tzaddik and Abba Shaul ben Botnis. We're going to get there in a few weeks. And it says that we learned from this story that Shepokikin, that you would be allowed to take a job. Basically, if you have two apartments, let's say, and they share a wall, and there's a mace in one apartment, and then So we're concerned about via the window in between the two walls. If there's a window in that wall that separates the two apartments, well then the tumas hameis will transfer through the window. So what you can do is, you could take a kli and you could just stick it in the window. And that kli isn't talui, is not tied and dangling. And you can just put it up in that window, and we're not concerned about Rabbi Eliezer, who says that a shutter would have to be tied and dangling. So we learn from there that you can stick this kli in the wall. Umodin, you can even measure, I don't remember what you're measuring, but I think maybe like the size of the kli or something. Okay? Oh, Rashi says you can measure the size of a mikvah or like rags or something. V'koshrin, and you can tie on Shabbos. Right? A kesher that's not kesher shakayama, fine. Beseder. The point being that, meaning on the one hand, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha is saying that the halach is like Rabbi Eliezer, that this window shutter would have to be tied and dangling. Yet Rabbi Amram says that we have a Mishnah later on that says it wouldn't have to be tied and dangling. It would be like the Chachamim. I guess the Chachamim according to Rabbi Abba, that it would need to be neither tied nor dangling. Amalei Abaye. So then Abaye says to Rabbi Amram, "My daitech mishum dikatani stama." So to which Abaye comes to the defense of Yitzchak Nafcha, and he says to Rabbi Amram, he says, "But why do you prefer that later Mishnah?" Right, where they use this kli to close the window. Well, it's because it's a stam mishnah, and because this mishnah was said stam, therefore the halach is like a stam mishnah, and therefore you want to say that you'd be allowed to use a window shutter, even though it's not tied and it's not dangling. Negar nami stami. We just talked about that negar nigrar Mishnah, where we had a machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanakama being Rabbi Eliezer. So we see that was also, it was just stated stam, it wasn't stated as Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, it was a stam, and yet, so therefore, if you want to go based on a stam, so say you could say like Rabbi Eliezer as well. So the Gemara says, yeah, but hachi, vafilu hachi ma'aserav. The Gemara says, yeah, but even so, Abaye, actually, it would make sense like Rav Amram, to go like that later Mishnah, because over there it was actually saying a Maiserav. It was saying a story that happened, that there was a real story with real people, the father of Reb Tzadok and Abba Shaul ben Botni, that they actually took a kli that wasn't tied and wasn't dangling and put it in the window. And as we also learned earlier, what was it, it says over here, on Daf Chaf Aleph Mud Aleph, that when you have a story of like a real rabbi who actually did in a certain way, not just speculation about, this rabbi says this, that rabbi says that, but you have a real story in which they paskin in a certain way and they acted a certain way. So we see that in reality the halach is like that, and therefore Rav Amram's bringing in that Mishnah from later with that story where they put this kli in the window even though it wasn't tied and it wasn't dangling, that is we would prefer to take that as a proof. New Mishnah. Kisoy akelim sheishleim beis achiza nitalim b'Shabbos. So the Mishnah says, according to the Tanakama, if you have a lid of a kli and it has a handle, you can carry it on Shabbos. Okay? So you have some kind of kli, and the Gemara is going to explain what kind of kli we're talking about, but you have a kli, and this kli has a lid on it. As long as the lid has a handle, you can move it on Shabbos. Amar Rabbi Yossi, b'med dvarim b'kisoy kakos. About b'kisoy akelim, Venkach uvenkach nitalim b'Shabbos. Rabbi Yossi disagrees with the Tanakama, and he says that while I agree with you, or I admit that when it comes to a lid of the ground, it would have to have a handle. What's a lid of a ground? Let's say you have some kind of a pit, and you have a cover for the pit. So that's more like a bonek kind of thing. That if you don't have a handle on it, it might seem like you're like actually adding to the pit. You're taking a cover and adding it to the pit. Therefore, by having a handle, it makes it clear that it's just a lid and that it's meant to be taken on and off. And that it's its own kli. So Rabbi Yossi says, look, I admit over there that you would need a handle in order to make it clear that it's a kli, and if it doesn't have a kli, then you wouldn't be able to move it. However, when it comes to kalim, meaning the handle itself would be a kli, meaning when it comes to the ground, and you have like a pit or something, and you have a cover for the pit, so that cover would need to have a handle in order, right, to show that it's a kli. And what can you do with these kalim? And you can put food on it. You can put other items on this lid, right? But unless when it comes to the ground, I need to have a handle on it to make it clear that it's a kli and it's not part of the pit. It's not binyan. However, says Rabbi Yossi, when it comes to kalim, when it comes to vessels, the lid would not need a handle on it. Okay? Fine. Amr of Yehuda bar Shila, Amr of Asi, Amr of Yochanan, Vushesh Toras Kli Alein. Okay. So as we saw a few minutes ago, says Rav Yehuda bar Shila, in the name of Rav Asi, in the name of Rav Yochanan, that when we're talking about being able to move these lids, the lid itself would have to have a Toras Kli Alein. They would have to in themselves be a Kli, not just like a random item. If it doesn't have a Toras Kli Alein, then there's nothing to talk about. You can't move it. In order to even be able to talk about, well, if it has a base yad, if it doesn't have a base yad, if it has a handle or not, it would first have to be a Kli to begin with. Now, says the Gemara, D'chuli alma kisur karkaos im yesh lehem beis achiza in ilolo. Now, everyone, both the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yossi agree that when it comes to a lid for like a covering for like a pit, in order to be able to move it on Shabbos, it would have to have a handle. Nobody questions that. Kisui akelim, afagav de'ein lehem beis achiza. And for a cover of like some kind of a kli, let's say like a soda bottle or something, the lid of a soda bottle, the cap of a soda bottle, you can move that even if there's no handle on it. Ki plige, where they argue, is b'chelim dechabrinu ba'ara, is by vessels that you've connected them to the ground. Remember yesterday we had the machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim about by an oven that we say it has to be connected to the ground. So like by an oven and a stove that are connected to the ground, so on the one end they're kalim, on the other end they're connected to the ground. So how do we treat their lid? Do we treat their lid like a kli and say that you don't need to have a handle on it? Or do we treat their lid like the ground and we say that you do have to have a handle on it? Ma'asover gazrinon, ma'asover lo gazrinon. So the Tanna Kama says you have to have a handle on it because we make a gzera of lids of ovens. We make a gzera because of lids of the ground, and you have to have a handle on the lid of the oven. Whereas Rabbi Yossi says, I'm not concerned that if you have the lid of an oven without a handle on it, that you're going to end up moving the lid of a pit without a handle on it. Therefore, he says, look, the lid of a pit needs to have a handle. The lid of an oven does not have to have a handle. Lishna achrina, you could say the same machlokas in a different way. Ki plige, where they argue is b'chisui tanur, is in the covering of an oven. Mar medamile l'kisui karka, umar medamile l'kisui kelim. The Tanna Kama says that we have to treat the cover of an oven like the cover of the ground, and it needs a handle, whereas Rabbi Yossi compares it to the lid of kelim, and that you do not need a handle on it. Hadran alach kol akelim. We will come back to you kol akelim. All right, new parak mefanin afilu arba v'chamesh kupos shel teven v'shel tvua mipnei haorchim mipnei bitol beis hamedrash avalo es haotzar. What does that mean? So I'm going to read that again. Mefanin afilu arba v'chamesh kupos shel teven v'shel tvua. So you can, if you have, I don't know, let's say in your house, you have boxes full of straw or full of grain, and now you have people coming and you want to get them out of the way so that they have a place to sit. So no problem, get them out of the way. And you don't have to worry about tircha. You don't have to worry about doing too much work. It's okay, you can move away the boxes. The Gemara is going to explain what it means 4 or 5, but you can move 4 or 5 boxes of straw, of grain, because there are guests coming, Torah, or because there are, students coming to study Torah. You can get them out of the way. However, do not clear out the entire storage house. Okay? Mifan and Truma Tahora. Now, what kind of stuff are we allowed to move away? You can move away Truma that is pure, Udmai, right? Food that we're not sure if Meiser was taken from it. Umaiser Rishon Shnit LaTrumaso. You can also move away, the Meiser Rishon, that of course we know by now that you give to the Levi, even though we haven't worked with it in a while, but we give it to the Levi. And then the Levi takes 1/10 of that and he gives that to the Kohen. So once you have this Meiser that the Levi has given the 10% to the Kohen, you can move that. Umaiser Sheni, Ve'ektish Shenifdu. Right? It's like the very beginning of the 7th parak of Brachas. We talked about all these things. So also if you have Meiser Sheni, which is of course after Truma and Meiser, you take the Meiser Sheni and you bring that to Jerusalem and eat it. But what you can do is instead of schlepping all that food, you can just transfer its holiness to money and then go to Jerusalem and use that money to buy stuff, to buy food. The Hekdesh Shenifdu, as well as Hekdesh, like you say this animal is going to be a korban. Instead of schlepping the animal to Jerusalem, you can also just transfer its kedusha to money and buy a korban over there in Jerusalem. Tormus ayavesh, as well as a dried tormus bean that generally you would cook, but raw you can technically feed it to animals. Avaloas atevel, but not completely untied food. Veloas maiserishin, shalonit la trumaso. You can't move if a Levi has meiser rishon but has not yet separated trumas meiser to give to the Kohen. Veloas meiser sheni ve'ektesh shaloniftu, and you can't move meiser sheni or hektesh that was not yet that was not redeemed to money. Veloas halof, veloas hachardol, and not this loaf bean which is not even eaten by animals, and not mustard seeds. Guess that those aren't eaten raw either. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel matir beluf mipnei shu meichel orvin. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says actually you would be able to move these loof beans because ravens can eat them. Chavile kash v'chavile eitzim v'chavile zradim. If you have bundles of straw or bundles of wood or bundles of reeds, if you've set them aside to be animal food, so no problem, you can move them. But if you haven't set them aside to be animal food, so then you may not move them. Says the Gemara, no, the Mishnah said that you'd be allowed to move 5 of these boxes. Well then obviously if you can move 5 boxes, you can move 4 boxes. So why does it say 4 or 5? So Amar Rav Chizda, arba mei chamesh, v'chamesh mei otzar gadol. So if Chizda says no, what it means it means that if there are 5 boxes, you can move 4 of them. If there's a big storage house with like lots and lots of boxes, you can move maximum of 5. But you cannot clear out the entire storage house, because we're concerned that if you clear out the entire storage house, you might then find holes and you might fill in the holes, and we don't want that. So we say if there are 5, you can move 4 out of 5. If there's a big storage house, you can move a maximum of 5. Umay avalo es otzar. What does it mean? And do not empty out the entire storage house. Obviously, we just said that you can only take out a maximum of 4 out of 5, or a maximum of 5 out of entire storage house. We know not to do the entire otzar. It means that if you've never cleared out anything from this storage house, well then you shouldn't start now because it's muktzah. Umani Rabbi Yehuda the Islay muktzah, and this is like Rabbi Yehuda, the author of this Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, who holds of muktzah, and therefore he's saying that if you have not yet started taking anything out of the storage house, well then don't start now because it's muktzah. Ushmuel Amar Arba v'chamesh, whereas Shmuel argues on Rav Chizda, which is interesting because Shmuel is like super high up. Rav Chizda was a student of Rav Huna, was a student of Rav. Like, I don't know. Interesting that unless what it could be is that like there's an assumption that Rav Chizda is maybe saying Rav's opinion, and Rav and Shmuel do argue, but whatever it is, it's interesting that Rav Chizda would be arguing with Shmuel directly. In any event, Shmuel says what it means 4 or 5 boxes, kida amrei inshe, it means 4 or 5 vibaya filu tuva. But the fact of the matter is, it's not being exact. It's not saying 4 or 5. It means a whole bunch of boxes. If you want to clear out 100 boxes, clear out 100 boxes, whatever it is, however much you want. Vafilu tuva nami mifanin. But do not clear out the entire storage house. Umay avaloes kola otzar shelo yigmor kulo. What does it mean? Just not the entire storage house? Don't clear everything out of the storage house. Dilma asilash vuegumos, because we're concerned that maybe you'll end up filling in some holes. If you find holes, you'll fill them in. So don't clear out the entire storage house, but you can clear in a whole bunch. However, don't clear out the entire storage house, but you can start clearing out the storage house. Umani Reb Shimoni Tleis Muktzah, and who's the author of this Mishnah who says that you can start clearing out the storage house for the first time? It's Rabbi Shimon, who doesn't hold of Muktzah. Alright friends, well that was Daf Kuf Chav Vav. I think that Lamaisa was a much shorter dafs than like most of the dafs over the last month. So that's cool. Let's review what we've learned. So we started off the day talking about window shutters, right? Trying to understand what is the opinion of the Chachamim there. Rabbi Eliezer says that the window shutters would have to be both tied and dangling in the air. The Chachamim argue. To what extent do they argue? So Rabbi Abba says in the name of Rav Kahana that they say that it wouldn't even have to be tied at all. It could just be lying on the ground as long as he set it aside before Shabbos, that he intends to use it as a window shutter. Whereas Rabbi Yirmiyah argues, and he says, no, it would have to be tied. It could be lying on the floor, sure, but it would have to be tied. Okay? And then that argument kind of took us for a while. We were saying that it's the same machlokes by Neger and Nigra. We talked about Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, that was whatever, but it essentially was really just talking about the machlokes in Rabbi Abba and Rabbi Yirmiyah. We then talked about moving the covers of kalim. So we said that when we're talking about the cover of like a pit in the ground, well then everybody agrees that it needs a handle because we're concerned about boneh. And when it's talking about mamash just like a regular vessel, everyone agrees that you don't need a handle on it. The machlokas is when it comes to a stove or an oven that are attached to the ground. Do we treat it like the ground, or do we treat it like like a kli? So according to the Tanna Kama, we treat it like the ground and it needs a handle. According to Rabbi Yossi, we treat it like a kli and it doesn't need a handle. Fine. Then we talked about moving different bundles of things. So Rav Chizda said that you can move 4 out of 5 or a maximum of 5 from the storage house, but do not, start taking things out of a storage house because they would be muktzah. And that's like Rabbi Yehuda holds of muktzah. Shmuel says you can take however much you want, but just don't finish up everything in the storage house. But you can start taking things out of the storage house, and that is like Reb Shimon, who doesn't hold of muktzah. Alright friends, well, that was Daf Kuf Chav Vav. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great day. Peace.